Hey everyone, you're listening to Heaving Bosoms, where two great friends recap romance novels while interrogating their feels and doing all the squeals. We've got a whole passel of new folks I want to welcome to the HB Patreon fam. I'm so happy to have you, Teresa S., Karen VM, Liesel, Amy ZC, Kyle R., Cassie A., Jamie B., and Greta S. Ooh! I hope you love all the extra content. And then, here's a huge virtual hug and big giant love to some longtime patrons, Kristen B., Kathleen, Hannah, Heather H., Caitlin R., and Jennifer G. Speaking of Patreon, oh my actual goddess, I had the best time at our watch party for Red, White, and Royal Blue. So first of all, the movie is absolutely astounding. Like, they managed to capture the book to perfection. And then being able to experience it with a ton of HBs and discuss it afterward made the experience even better, leagues better. So thank you to everyone who came. You really made it so special. And then for everyone who couldn't make it, the video of our watch party will be going up on Patreon this week. So get stoked about that. You'll get all our in-the-moment reactions and everything else. But now, we've got a recap that's been a long time coming. Meredith joined me to chat about A Lady Awakened by Cecelia Grant. Here we go. Okay, I have to tell you how I've been a criminal lately.
Please do.
It's all in the name of gardening, you know?
Yes, your new obsession.
I feel like there's some leeway to be had as a result.
Okay.
And I'm not completely a criminal because I did ask permission on a couple of occasions. But I've been driving around town, seeing all of these gorgeous bushes and stuff and being like, I haven't seen that color of a butterfly bush in any of the places I've been or online stores I've been to and all that kind of thing. And look at that panicle hydrangea. I feel like I have the perfect spot for it. And I learned what a crepe myrtle is recently because I drove by one. And so I have been pulling over to the side of the road and absconding with cuttings. They're currently propagating in my office. I've got some rooting hormone on them. And I'm very excited about it. Listen, all of them were on public property-ish.
Public property-ish?
Yeah, like in front of a restaurant or in front of a YMCA, you know.
Sure.
And I didn't take big ones or whatever.
Sure.
You couldn't even notice. However, the butterfly bush, that was on firmly private property. And so I was the crazy person who, after I dropped my kids off at camp, I went and I knocked on this poor person's door and I said, "Hello, you have a beautiful butterfly bush. Can I be a maniac and take some of it?" They were like, "Yes, fellow gardener, please." Right off into the sunset.
Fellow gardeners do tend to be please take this. I find that plant people are there's a couple of crazy types of plant people who will pay several $100s for a plant and then guard it religiously. But then there's other plant people that are like, this plant just keeps growing. Please take some, take some, take some, take some. And then, everybody in the entire county has spider plants that were originally one person.
Right.
Plant people are kind of awesome that way. I have some Tradescandia, which I think is how you pronounce it, the long sort of dangly purple flower. It's very pretty, or leaf. It's very pretty. That was from a plant my sister-in-law bought 4 summers ago and just kept growing. So we just gave it a haircut and then stuck a bunch in water and now I have a whole bunch. Plants are great.
Plants are the best. And actually that's been one of my favorite move-in gifts recently is herbs from my garden and then just cuttings of plants that I have. If I know they're quasi plant people at the very least, you know, I'm not going to foist plants upon someone, but yeah, it's just like, ooh, they're the best. I love plants.
Yeah, when we bought our house, I texted like the listing to my sister and she was like, that house looks amazing. I can't wait for you to fill it with books and plants. And I have
Yes.
done that. Like you can see right there, books, and you
Yep.
can see right there, plants. Like they're
Yep.
just everywhere and it makes me really happy.
Absolutely. Yeah. So sometimes you have to be mildly criminal, but
Sure.
I think it's worth it,
I mean,
frankly.
like, if it makes the world a better place, can it be wrong?
Yeah.
Let's
You
save
want to
that
know
for
who?
a different podcast.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know who would not approve
Oh my God.
of my
Martha would very much not approve.
Martha would murder me.
She would. She would make you go back to that restaurant and back to that YMCA and hand them the cutting back and apologize.
Yeah. Yeah, completely. She would. And like, oh my God, 40 lashes, I feel like.
Yeah,
I would never be
intense.
welcome in her presence
No.
again. Oh God, Martha is a stickler.
She is. Melody, I have a question. Did you like Book?
I loved Book, but I feel real weird about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. I'm excited to talk about this. Listener, we're talking about a book that I like to call A Lady Awakens in a Probably Sexual Manner, unsure question mark. I thought it was going to be straightforward, and then it was more complicated than.
It was way more complicated than that, but it felt like everybody like ended up on the same page.
Yeah.
You know?
But it took a weird way to get there, I feel.
It did. It did. Okay, so this is A Lady Awakened by Cecelia Grant. This is a 5-star recommendation that we've had on the list since 2019, and somehow it hadn't gotten, onto the podcast. But during one of our Patreon author hangs or whatever, we were just hanging out a little bit during it, and Patricia was like, yeah, I recommended A Lady Awakened, and be like, for this reason. And I was like, well, that means that it's going on the next list. Like, Patricia gets what she wants, honestly.
Yes.
Say it to my face. Absolutely. Yeah. So I have weird feelings about this book, but I loved it. It made me cry for the first time in a while. I haven't had like big feelings about big angsty feelings about a book in a minute. Oh, man.
It was one of those books where I wasn't sure how it was going to resolve, because it seemed like what each party wanted was going to be really like, you cannot have both of those things.
Right.
Like, and I really like books like that, because a lot of times you're like, yeah, okay, but what's going to happen.
And I think that's why I had big angsty feelings for the first time in a while, because I truly didn't know what they were going to do.
I will also say the writing style reminded me a lot of Queen of Historicals, Mary Ballock.
Oh, Mary Ballock blurbed this book.
Did she?
I believe so. I think it's on the cover. Yeah. And
I got it on Kindle, so I probably didn't look at it. But the writing style reminded me very much of Mary Ballock's in a way that I don't know that I can explain, but I really like, because I like Mary's writing a lot.
Yeah, same here.
So if you're into that, which I cannot explain any further, you'll probably like this book.
One of the reasons is because like the speaking style is so specific. Yeah. And like she captures what I assume is like the old-timey speaking style, in that like the heroine will only refer to herself as one. Like, one will not do X, Y, and Z. Right. Or like one would like to do Schmurderber. But it didn't get in the way of my enjoying the book at all.
Yeah, and it had that like very formal, like everybody was always Mr. or Mrs. regardless of how long they knew each other. Like, I think she might have referred to him by his given name twice.
Oh, yeah. And it was hesitant both times.
Yeah. So it just has that like sort of formality that Mary Ballock's writing has a lot. I don't know. I really liked the writing and the storytelling and the way the story was told.
Yeah. And I've never seen this premise before, because ever.
No.
Because even though the heroine
I've seen every single historical that existed.
Same. I was like, it's not sex lessons. It's not like it was.
Yeah.
It's a whole new thing. And like if you have more recs like this, let a bitch know because it puts some wrinkles in it that I really enjoyed and
Yeah.
haven't. Yeah. So the heroine is a very upstanding, like principled, she calls herself person, but she's put in this impossible situation because she was married 10 months ago and her like alcoholic, we find out mildly terrible husband has fallen off a horse and broken his neck and died suddenly. And his whole thing was like, I need a fucking heir. He had a wife for 10 years before that, never got an heir, and he's been just plugging away at her, trying to get her pregnant the whole time they've been married.
And we find out later in the book that there's like a dastardly brother that's set to inherit. And throughout the book, there's like more and more reasons why this person shouldn't inherit. He like got several of the maids in trouble when he was a kid there. He's like cruel, he's abusive, like.
Yeah.
And we find out like fairly late in the book that the husband knew that. Like he knows that his brother is a terrible person, and that's why he so badly wants an heir, so that his brother doesn't inherit. Which added like a really weird, interesting twist of like, is she actually doing what her husband would have wanted? Like, would he have? Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah, but the husband like doesn't put anything in the will to like make it so if he doesn't have an heir, there's a way to circumvent the brother. Like it's not going to happen.
And she gets sort of fucked. Like she gets like £1,000 and that's it. Like
no house, no living,
nothing. Like he invested most of her dowry.
That's the one.
So like she's only getting like 10% of that back. I guess traditionally like she was supposed to get most or all of it back.
Yeah, more of it back.
So,
but it's gone because he invested it badly.
Right. And so the book opens, they're talking with the solicitor and he's like, hey, I'm really sorry. Like you basically have nothing. And her brother's like, this is an outrage. How dare, blah, blah, blah. And she's just sitting there like very demurely, her back very, very straight. I mean, like, yeah, I could be upset about this, but like, it's not going to accomplish anything. So like, what are we going to do?
Wow. Things I cannot even imagine feeling in that moment.
So the solicitor's like, yeah, so like, unfortunately, it's just going to the brother unless there's a heir.
And she's currently on her period.
Right.
And she's like,
that's not going to, wait a minute. Is there an heir? And she goes, well, I'll let you know, even though she knows that's not a thing.
Right.
But she's a Mrs. There's not like, she's not a duchess or whatever. She's just like a regular lady, part of the landed middle class, whatever. So they have tenants and she feels like a really strong responsibility towards her tenants and towards her servants,
her staff.
Like, she like managed to get like all of their roofs replaced. She's trying to champion a school. Like she just has this really strong sense of like moral justice. And I'm in this this position in order to take care of those who have less than me and who are of a lower social station than me. And I need to stay here so that I can continue to do these things. Like if I leave, the school's not going to happen, like all of these things. So she and her maid, Sheridan, start to talk.
Yeah.
Sheridan's a little something, if you know what I
mean. She's, she'll make things work is what she'll do.
Yeah, she will.
And so they start talking and she's like, what do you know about Mr. James Russell, the person who's going to inherit? And very quickly, Sheridan's like, all I've heard is that when he was here, he did capital R, rape 2 maids, get them pregnant, ruin them, and then just fire them. Right. So like, he's a predator is what I've heard.
Right.
And so then they're talking about like, what could she do? Because she has to have an heir. And Sheridan's like, I have heard ladies manage to get pregnant post-death and then carry on with the estate. I don't know. Could you do something like that?
You could also maybe find a woman who got in trouble and, maybe just raise her baby. Like,
maybe do pillow times and then do take that baby when it's born. I don't know.
Thankfully, Martha's like, I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah.
I don't want to take some other lady's baby away. That makes me feel a little gross, but like, is there like a person in this neighborhood who can maybe help with option?
And the cool thing is that that morning at church, there was a very good looking, very tall man who walked in and promptly fell asleep in the pew. And so she's judging him hard. And
Hard.
then he wakes up and makes eye contact with her and like gives her this like dopey sex smile. And then
I think
like,
she describes it as like the kind of smile that one would expect to see upon waking up next to one's lover in the morning or something like that. Like it was just like really lovely and very inappropriate for church. She is
yes.
scandalized and a
And
little
he very quickly
intrigued.
like comes to his senses and is like, "Well, I'm a proper man sitting at church. Everything's cool." And then fucks off immediately as soon as the sermon's over. So she's asking around about him, and it turns out he's this 26-year-old eldest son of a baron.
Oh, we should say Martha's
What?
21, by
She's
the way.
21 years old in her body?
Forgot that constantly.
She is 65 in her soul.
Easily 65.
Minimum.
Yeah.
Minimum. She's the stodgiest, curmudgeoniest lady.
I love her.
Same. But like, wow, girl.
Yeah.
She's never had a youthful
21.
whims. Yeah,
Never.
in her life.
She came out of the womb 65 years old and grumpy.
Absolutely.
Well, actually, that's probably not true. When she was like 7 or 10, like
Yeah.
her childhood, we find out was bad, but like she was raised by a governess who liked to tie her to a board so her posture would be correct. And so I feel like any youthful spirit was
doused out pretty good.
Anyways,
yeah.
She's 21, so we didn't say that, and I feel like it's important.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So he gets has been banished to this lower holding of this baronet because he's like spending too much money and he's drinking too much and he's fucking too much and like he's just too much.
Right.
And he's going to get his shit together or he's not coming back to London, his dad says, in a much more hoity way than I just did.
Correct. But
and
basically
she's
means
like,
the same thing.
Yeah, she's like, "Oh, there's a wastrel nearby.
Who
I might
wants
be able to
money?
Yeah,
that
who
I
needs money?
Kind of have.
Ew.
So
So she sends him a card, a widow's card. All right.
She goes
That's
to
not
call
proper.
on him very early in the morning, and her husband's been dead for like 5 seconds. He's looking at this card being like, what kind of human is this that would disregard propriety? Like, he's like, this is very inappropriate.
Which is bananas.
Right.
Yeah. And so because of that, he's like talking to his land agent. And
who
when
I
he
love
gets this
also,
card,
by the way,
love the land agent. Cannot remember his name. Love him though.
Granville or something.
Yeah, that sounds right. And he has to impress this dude because this is the dude who's reporting back to his dad.
And Granville's all about like delivering basically lectures on like his responsibilities as a landowner, and like he's like talking about how he boarded up windows so he didn't have to pay as much window tax. And Theo, the guy, is just like, what are you even I don't care.
I love
like,
open windows.
Supposed to,
why would you ever do that?
Right. And Granville's like recommending this like incredibly boring book, and Theo, we find out, is like a hands-on person. He's not like a books person. So he is miserable.
Yes. And the land agent is like, I don't think in this case it would be improper to call on her because she just did a bunch of like improvements on her property recently. She redid a bunch of cottage roofs and shit. And I think you would have a lot to talk about were you to, you know, pay her some company. And he's like, I guess. So he goes over there. He's announced and she's like putting on her big girl pants. And she's like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do an indecent proposal on him.
Yes. With 2 different kinds of cake.
Oh my God.
Which
love her.
Any indecent proposal should have at least 2 kinds of cake, as far as I'm concerned.
Absolutely. So he is sitting there and she's like, so I bet a person in your position would be really, really tempted to go to Brighton, wouldn't they? Don't you think you could find some, distractions in Brighton? And he's like, yeah, I guess, but also she's supposed to be really proper. And is she reporting back to Granville? And how am I supposed to play this? And then finally she's like, but I bet you just don't have money though, probably, right?
And he's like, wow, wow. Okay.
Ma'am.
You've been gossiping about me, which I do not appreciate.
I know, which is hilarious because he'll very, very soon realize that that is literally the opposite of her whole deal.
Yes.
Lady doesn't like confide in anyone.
No.
And she, later on in the book, she literally says, "I don't give off like the confiding sort of vibes."
You
It's
know what
very
my
funny.
favorite part of this book was?
Tell me everything.
When she realized that he sent callers so she could have friends.
Oh my god.
I lost it.
Same.
So good.
Same.
All right,
Oh
we're
my
getting
god.
ahead of
Yeah.
ourselves though.
We
So
are. We are.
he's like, how about you just say what you're gonna say? Because like I'm not the kind of person that's here for subtlety. Like, please come right out with it. And she's like, cool, I would like to hire you. I would like to have a child. I have exactly 1 month to do this. I will pay
Mhm.
you a quarter of the amount of dollars she was supposed to get from her widow's portion or
Yeah, yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
And if it's a son, I'll give you fully the other 3/4.
Right.
Like, she's gambling all of her dollars on this.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
he's like, huh?
He's like, I can't, but he almost spits out his tea. He's like, I cannot believe this. He starts coming up with reasons. He's like, I don't want to like get a baby with you, and then if it's a girl, you're just fucked and you have no money. And she's like, oh, don't worry about that. Like, I'm provided for in the will, and like I'll go live with my brother or whatever. And he's like, why don't you do that now? She looks at him dead in the face and she says, because I do not choose to do that.
I love her.
Period. The end. Oh my
Yeah.
God. So he's trying to come up for reasons why not. And she's like, all of those reasons are moot. I've got it covered. I really just need you to like give me seed, is what she says constant. What they are both saying constantly.
I hated it a lot.
Oh my God. I kind of loved it by the end. I was fully turned around.
Towards
Pavlov's dogged me.
Towards the end, it felt like it became a little bit more of a joke.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
not necessarily between them, but like between the author and us.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
But yeah. So, and he was like, well, do you want to do this like right now? And she's like, yes, actually, I would. And he was like,
oh, wait, I'm sorry. Also, he's like, okay, really quick though. So what I'm hearing you say is you want to hire me to be your whore.
And
she goes, well, I wouldn't say that. It's really more of a stud situation.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's like, do you want to start right away?
And she's like, yes, I'm going to go through that door and then you'll come in 20 minutes later. And she just leaves. And he's like, okay, guess we're doing this now.
Yeah. And he realizes that like the way she was talking to him the whole time, the way that she was like leaning over slightly to present a tiny bit of cleavage was
she
like a
left
thing
off
she was
her
doing.
little scarf situation, which she like is never without. And he realizes that like the whole thing was like her trying to be seductive, which she's terrible at.
Terrible at it. It works for him though, I'll tell you that much.
It does. Because he like has this thing about like stern women. And so he's like, this is going to be fun.
Yeah. I really thought that this was going to be leaned into a tiny bit more, but I feel like that's like book 2 of their relationship, you know?
Yeah. Like there was that one little bit, but yes.
Yeah. Yeah, but he loves the way that she's talking to him. And he's like, I bet that she could just put me in my place when I'm being bad.
And I would like that to happen, please.
And I would love to be bad. So he goes back there and he tries to be like sexy about it. He's like, so what do you like? Can I look at you? I'm going to tweak a nipple a tiny bit. And she's like, that all of that is unnecessary unless it's going to allow you to prepare. And he's like, prepare? Like, ma'am, a slight breeze and I'm hard. We're good there.
Yeah. He is 26.
Yeah.
Let's remember.
Like, he can go however many times you want.
Right.
But he's like, will you turn over? And she's like, I absolutely will not do that. We will not be doing things that way.
She says, I did not authorize anything out of the ordinary.
And he says, don't worry. We'll have sex face to face like Christians. I just want to see your backside. It's so good. And so he's like, let's do, like, where do you like to be touched? Is it your neck? Is it your ear? You know,
do you want
whatever.
me to kiss on you? Do you want? And she's like, no.
None of the above.
None of it.
And she's like, I just want you to get in here and get it done. And he's like, I mean, don't but shouldn't you be prepared? And she's like, I feel like, you can do it either way. So like, let's just do that. And he's like, but why do you want me to do that? That sounds terrible.
Yeah.
And she's just like, I want nothing. I am here for your seed. And so that's what you're going to give me. And that's all. And so he's like, I guess I'll like get up on her or whatever.
Yeah.
And so he's like, I guess I've got enough pre-cum to like be wet enough. And then he just starts pumping and shuddering into her. And she's just a brick wall the whole time.
Is
Doesn't
this
move.
the part where afterwards she goes,
Yes.
five groans and 4 moans, and she had what she wanted, or something like that?
And then in the quiet, she's like, is that regular? And he's like, what do you mean by regular? And she's like, well, I mean, like, how long it lasted. Is that regular, or does it normally take you longer? And he's like, ma'am, you said you wanted a quick and dirty. If you wanted a marathon, you should have asked for a marathon. She's like, no. No, I was pleasantly surprised. Like, she's always talking about her late husband and how he would just like labor over her and sweat on her and grunt on her and like forever and ever and ever until he finally came. Oh, sounds terrible.
So he leaves and is feeling like kind of conflicted. He's like, I don't actually know if I'm on board with what just happened. Like, I'm feeling a little gross about it. But she's paying me.
Yeah, like, I guess she's the one who's like gonna define the terms. And if that's what she wanted, I don't understand it, but like, I can do it, I guess.
Yeah.
So then she gets all of her household together and she has a meeting with them, being like, I understand the danger you're in. Here's the situation that I am in. If I find out that I am pregnant, legitimately, she tells them, she doesn't tell them that, but she doesn't say anything otherwise.
Right. So like Sheridan's in on this, but nobody else.
Right. And so she's like, if I can stay, you all obviously have a place here. But if you don't want to take that chance and you want to find employment before that, you let me know and I will help you find a place. I will give you the best recommendations. Like, I want to make sure everybody here is okay.
Right.
And she actually says, I want you all to know where my allegiances lie.
Yeah.
And like, it's with you women and
yes,
the tenants.
The women supporting women in this book was incredible. So just, oh my gosh, it was so good. That was like a solidly consistent theme throughout the entire book, and it was incredible. And one of the things I really liked is that Martha, she's been trying to start this school with the pastor, the
curate, Mr. Atkins.
The curate at the local church. And so she's like had to figure out how to convince the families to send their sons to this school. And she also really wants the girls to go to school. But she has to figure out how to convince all these parents to send their girls to school. Because, like, why would you educate girls? That's nonsense.
That's silly.
And the argument that she comes up with is that educated men, merchants and shop owners, aren't going to want to marry stupid women. They're going to want to marry somebody they can have a conversation with. And so your girls need to learn how to read, and they need to be educated so that they can attract these higher status men.
Because there's not a whole lot of farming work anymore. Right. A lot of it's being taken over by automation.
The part in England where like farming drastically decreasing, people are moving to the city, people are working in mills, people are working in factories, etc. And so she's like, listen, this life that you have, that you were sort of like guaranteed that your parents have before you, it's not going to be there. And if you want your daughters to be in a better situation, they have to be educated so they can attract that class of men, which I kind of love.
So smart,
as a sneaky,
so savvy,
like way to get the girls educated.
Yeah,
because like it was very much just like looking out for their best interests. And we also find out that like what she's wanting for them is what she wants. She wants a relationship where her mind is appreciated and she like
and valued above all else, really.
Right. And she like Theo keeps like whispering sweet nothings in her ears, like, "Oh, your skin is like silk, and you're blah." And she's like, "But like,
I don't give a fuck.
I don't care about that. Like, ask me my opinions about something." I love it
the whole time. It's great. Yeah, she's like, I would say, like I was trying to figure it out, and I think I can't remember what it's called, but there is a type of sexuality that's most turned on by like intellectual things.
It is sapiosexual.
Thank
And I
you.
know that because of the amazing Sandra Bullock Channing Tatum movie, The Lost City, which,
That's
if you
right.
have not seen, listener, you need to go watch.
You have to. You
It's
have to. It's so
so
good.
good.
Yeah. Yeah, so she's like I think a cross between sapiosexual and demisexual because she
Yes.
needs teamwork and like she needs to be valued on a heart level and a mind level or
And
like it's dry.
she needs to be able to like respect her partner and know her
Yeah.
partner. And she tells him at once, like, there's nothing to admire about you. It's like I don't want to like.
Oh my God. So I think I have weird feelings about this book because I spent the first third of it being like fucking pissed off and offended on his behalf.
Yes.
You know, like there are so many times when she just looks him dead in the face and she's like, "You're wasting your life and there's nothing to admire about you. Why would I find you sexy?"
Right.
And like there were a couple of times when later on in the book she says like I need to admire the man that I'm with, and he like finishes the sentence for her, and then there's this pause because I read it in audio. There's this pause, and my reaction would have been, "And why don't you admire me then?"
Yeah.
But instead he says, "But do you have to? Like I can give you pleasure, and I think that it would still work."
Yeah.
And she's just not having it. But yeah, she's so mean to him
And
the
also,
whole time.
like, I kind of loved it because he is very
Yeah.
much one of those people that's like, he's a tall, blonde, white dude, y'all. Like,
Yep.
he
Rich
smiles
one.
at a woman and she melts. And he's used to just going through life, getting whatever he wants handed to him.
Yeah.
And he literally has not thought about, like, anything outside of his station, anything outside of his life. Okay, if you read The Ravenels by Lisa
Okay.
Kleypas and you
Yes.
like West, you will like
Yes.
this book.
That's true.
Very similar character arc for the
Mhm.
male main character as West, which
Mhm.
is a thing. Like, just give it all
Yeah,
to
yeah.
me.
I mean, but maybe like turned up to 11 a tiny bit.
A
I
little
think,
bit, yeah.
Right? Like he's not like offensive about it, but he's very just like carefree and he doesn't understand the structure behind him that allows him to be so carefree.
Right. And he's like, well, why are we paying our tenants so little money? And the land agent's
Yeah.
like, because of XYZ reasons. And he's like, well, why can't we blah blah blah? And he's like, we don't like wheat doesn't make enough money. So like
Right.
he's like explaining to him the economy of like, this is how
But
this works. Like this
yeah.
land is small. We don't have enough land to farm at the scale we would need to do all these
Mhm.
improvements so that we can make more money. So, he's like,
Mhm.
and Theo is just like, going through life, happy, carefree.
Well,
so
but what I love
gonna
about him,
yeah, what I was going to say though is I kind of love that she was like,
he has
you're
to
a
work for it.
wastrel. And I
Mhm.
can't appreciate that. And he's like, oh shit, like this is the first time that like somebody that he like wants their attention has been
Yeah.
like, you're kind of useless.
You're not up to snuff.
Yeah. So I did
yeah,
kind of love that, but she was a bitch about it.
She was a big bitch about it. Well, but I will say though, what I love about him and that conversation is that he's immediately like, well, there are other ways we can go about it. Like there's a different paradigm we can look at all of this with.
Right.
Because he doesn't understand if this farm is not making money. I know that the one in Lincolnshire is just like oozing money.
Right.
So why can't we take some of that and pay these workers more, knowing that on balance, our estate is only going to grow more? And so I love him for that because he's still concerned about everybody's well-being, and he's like, there's got to be a way to do this better.
Yeah. And I feel like that's actually maybe one of his strengths is that like he doesn't know anything about the situation he's walked into, which like on one hand is insufferable when somebody like, you don't know anything, now you're going to come in here and tell us how to do things. But he doesn't actually do that. But he does be like, well, why do we have to do it this way? Like well, that's the way we do it isn't like enough for him. So he's like,
right.
Okay, but what effect would that have on this other thing? And like, I really liked his approach to.
Yeah, he's an ideas guy, and he has an innate sense of fairness,
Yeah.
even though nothing's ever been fair in his life. It's only ever been in his favor.
Right. So one of the things that Granville is talking about is like, there's all of this. So in England times, there's like a lot of public land. Like people would own like their little plot of land that their house was on, but then like there would be all this communal land that like everybody can graze sheep on and everybody can hunt on, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so Granville's like, there's all these little bits of public land that we could enclose. We could like put fences around them and make them ours, and then you'd have more farming land. And
because the Enclosure Act had like just gone into place or something.
right.
And I understand enclosure to be England times. Fuck, I had it.
Eminent domain?
Eminent domain. Thank you. Yeah. England times eminent domain.
And so we're like getting ahead of ourselves in the book, but that's fine.
Right.
And so Theo is like, okay, but like who uses this land now and what do they use it for? And like, if we enclose it, what effect is that going to have? Like, that's his thought
on people
process.
who already live here.
Right. And he's like, oh, if we enclose this, like this girl that I just had a conversation with who's here, like watching her sheep, like she's not going to be able to graze her sheep here. Where is she going to graze her sheep? Like, which I really loved that, like, he didn't have that attitude that like a lot of England times people do of just like, well, this is
mine because it is. Yeah, absolutely.
Anyways.
Yeah, that put a flag on it and there's no repercussions for anyone else mentality.
No flag, no country.
Yeah. So the second time he like lays down next to her all naked and stuff, and he's like, so how many siblings do you have? And like, what's going on with your life? Tell me about you. And she's like, I really don't know why this is necessary at all. And he's like, well, I thought maybe if we got to know each other a little better and you were a little bit more comfortable with me, like your body wouldn't reject my penis almost.
Yeah.
You would just relax a little. It would be less tense.
She goes,
and
no,
she's sort of
we
not
can talk
having it.
later.
Yeah. She tells him like about her siblings and stuff, but then she's just like, please, I've got things to do. I'm sure you've got something to do. And yeah, so he gets it done and then fucks off.
No, then he's lying there afterwards and she's like, so what did you want to talk about?
Oh, yeah.
So this carries on. They like have this like arrangement where he like shows up and like comes in a back door and up a set of back steps and meets her in this like room in the East Wing at like whatever time every day. But also like they start talking and he brings her this like, oh my God, this book with this insufferably long name that Granville gave him. And he's like, here's an idea. Since you're into this stuff, why don't you read this book and then tell me about it? And she's like, why don't I read it to you?
Yeah. So why don't we read it together?
They're like afternoon, like sessions become like sex and then study sessions.
But first, shit goes down. Okay. Because as like the third and fourth time happen, he is like, oh, wait. Maybe not. No, I think So, sorry. So he like meets his tenants and stuff. Yeah. And as a result, he has a conversation with her where he's like, are your people on parish assistance?
That's right. So he goes to the Weaver's house and Mr. Weaver is like a hired laborer and the house is very squalid. There's like this very fat pig in the yard who wants desperately to get in the house and tries every time. And
honestly, justice for that pig. I'm so sorry, everyone.
There's like a bunch of geese that are like not in a pen. He's like in this house and the baby won't stop crying. And there's all these like listless children just sitting around and not doing anything. Yeah. And so he's like, Granville, like, what is happening? And he's like, oh, they're on parish support
assistance. Whatever it is. Yeah.
And he's like, why don't we pay our people enough money to like not need, like, that's not fair that my people are being supported by all the rest of the landowners around here. Like,
what the fuck?
Why can't I support my own people? So he's talking to her and he's like, are your people on this parish situation? And she's like, no.
She's like, well, no. First of all, we have tenants. We don't have hired laborers. Like we let them profit off of their land or whatever that situation was. And he's like, wow, that really sucks. Like, I don't want everybody, all the other people paying for it. And she's like, tenants too. Tenants pay the poor tax. And he's like, what? Like, this is extra, not okay. And so she is sitting there just being like, oh my God, ask me my opinion more. Let me tell you, let me give you the lay of the land and let's have a real conversation. And she's like, yes. And as a landowner, we have the ability to make these people's lives better. And that is our duty. And like, that is what we're here for. And then meanwhile, he's like crawling up to her and like grabbing her wrist and being like, ooh, you're so sexy when you're passionate.
And she goes, are you listening
She's
to me?
like,
And he's like, well, not to the words, but I like listening to your voice. And she goes,
ah.
blurp, blurp, blurp.
Yeah, she goes, womp womp, I'm done speaking. And then she's like, does this really work on women? Like, do other women have such susceptible wrists? She thinks to herself. Oh, she's so mad. And so she's just like, just put it in me, give me the seed, and like, get gone. I'm over it. So then he starts like he's trying everything he can. And he's like, I'm going to undress you this time. And like, I'm going to play with your hair maybe. And she's like, fuck this. Like, I don't need all of this. I don't understand. But like, I guess if it gets him going, like, that's my part of the bargain.
Can we
So
talk
by the
about
fifth
her
time,
recalcitrant nipple?
oh my, yeah, I'm just about to. Yeah. So the fifth time he comes over, he's like, maybe I'll just try like something totally different. So he asks her to put her legs around him while she's still dressed. And then he picks her up and he sets her on a dresser. And she's like, oh my God, I did not agree to anything exotic, but like, I guess I will let that go. He said, oh my God, she says like, I'll just bear whatever weird shit he's doing.
Uh-huh.
And then she says, her limbs and other parts were praised for their shape and proportion. She could have been any woman with all the trite shit he said to her. And then she goes, not that it mattered. As long as he brought the seed, she could bear whatever he brought with it. Whatever indignities he might feel moved to propose, she would endure them with patience and resolve.
What?
And meanwhile, he's just like, how the fuck am I going to do this for a whole month? He's looking at them in the mirror being like, maybe I can fantasize about that, being a widow who like really wants me, like, you know, and society be damned or whatever. He's trying so hard.
And he's like,
and
she keeps like saying very inopportune things like, just get on with it type things. And he's like,
yeah,
don't talk. Just,
yeah. At one point,
so
she's like, how long do I need to keep my legs up like this? And he's like, what is she, like, is she posing for a piece of art? Like, until I don't need it anymore. And he's like, yes, I do require it, and like, do it harder for me. And so she like, you know, clenches around him. But then he thinks to himself, like, why does her pleasure matter to me when it clearly doesn't matter to her? And she's got this really bored voice the whole time. And then he tries to like kiss up on her, and he gets a boob out, and he's like rubbing a tongue on her nipple. And he says that she tenses in every place but the right one. Like, he's never met such recalcitrant nipples in his whole life, and they just won't get hard for him.
So funny.
And then she goes, is that necessary? And then he's like, no, it's not. And like, don't talk, I beg you. And so then he's like trying to think of other women, and he's just like pumping away. He's like trying to get on with it, but he hears her do the tiniest, most patient sigh. And he's just like, can you please not? And she's like, not what? Not talk? I wasn't even talking. And he goes, no, you just make it so hard. And then she says, I don't need a moment-to-moment update on your state. And he's like, no, not like that. Like, it's difficult. You make it so difficult. And then, like, I'm going to lose my boner, basically.
Yeah.
And she says, it's not my fault. It's not as if I do anything to keep you from your sport. And then, everyone, he says, no. It's not as though you do anything at all. I may as well be swiving a propped-up corpse.
Oh.
He thinks he just thought that.
Oh, he did not just think that.
He's in such a state he did say it out loud. so she's sitting there super quiet. He looks at her and he's like, she looks so small from across the room. And she says, I'm sorry, I'll try harder. And then he's like, no, that's even worse. Like, that's even worse that I have to think about a woman trying to like bear
Yeah.
me fucking her. Like, this is terrible. And she's like, I think there are some erotic novels maybe in the library. Maybe you might be able to get your boner back that way.
He's
And
like,
he's like,
no,
if I,
no,
he
no.
literally says, if I can't keep an erection while I'm in a woman, no erotic novel is gonna salvage this. And so he gets dressed and she's just horrified. And then he says, shall I come the same time tomorrow? And she says, yes, please. I would like that. And then he's just feeling so bad. And like he leaves. Then it switches to her perspective when she's in church the next morning. And she's just like, I don't know why he would expect me to enjoy exotic acts with an unprincipled stranger, but like on the other hand, I could have at least been civil.
Yeah.
And I did not do that. Oh my God. So at church, he doesn't look at her at all.
We also find out, and I don't
Yeah.
remember exactly where it is. This is one of the things that took me by surprise in this book. I thought this book was going to do that like historical trope of like, it's called A Lady Awakened. I assume that he was gonna like coax her through her first orgasm, and
Yes.
no, turns out homegirl can take plenty good care of herself. She's just on principle refusing to participate in this.
She says that like she is doing this for other people. And so it would be really messed up if she also enjoyed it. It would turn it into something else. It wouldn't be a service she's doing for the community.
Right.
It would then be an affair or whatever. And so she's just like, she's refusing to come. And like, that's one of the reasons I felt so weird about this book, because I spent like the first third not only being pissed off for him, but also just like watching bad sex happen all the time and being like, what the fuck are we doing?
Yeah, I was kind of hoping
at this point
after this,
I didn't know who
like,
the hero was.
Yeah, I was really hoping that like he wasn't gonna come back the next day, which he did. But like I was just like, ooh, like I feel weird about this. I don't know.
Yeah, because she's spending she's spending so much time with this curate getting the school up, and we're not telling you about all of those conversations because it turns out he is not the hero. But at this point in my reading experience, I still wasn't fucking sure.
Yeah, like I was very like, what?
Yeah,
there's a lot of sex in this book, y'all, and most of it is not good.
Awful. Yeah. So he's so cute though, because he's like, I've got to go over to that fucking widow's house again because I told her I would, and a gentleman doesn't break his word. But also, I want to make sure I do something good today. Something good has to happen today. So before I go over there, I will bring all of my laborers like parcels of meat and stuff and visit with them and like do good landowner shit or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So he does this and he's like, well, this was fucking bad. Like, this was a terrible idea because I'm a single man and all of the women's husbands are in the field. And like, I didn't think about that at all. So everybody's uncomfortable and like, I don't know what to do. So his final stop is going to be at the Weaver cottage. And because he also has like a bachelor who lives in one of his cottages and works on the land, but obviously he's in the field and he doesn't have any family there, so he can't visit him. He ends up at the Weaver cottage, and the eldest daughter, Christine, who is developmentally delayed, is out taking care of the pig. And that was one of the things that sort of like brought him back to himself. And like when he was there last time, he was like, I shouldn't be fucking judging these people about anything in their lives. I don't know what their lives are like. And one of them is because of this eldest daughter being developmentally delayed.
Like he's thinking she should be able to like help. She should be able to like help with the baby. She should be able to do all these things, and she clearly can't. Yeah. Like that's probably making this a lot harder, and like I need to not be a jerk. And he also notices that she has this piece of gold colored paper that she very carefully is folding up into small squares and then unfolding and then folding back up
over and
and then
over again.
unfolding. And there's very well-worn creases. So
when he visits this
oh my
time,
God, I loved this part so
tell
much.
me everything.
So
tell me
he
everything.
shows up and she's feeding the pig and she's like not really looking at him. And he's like, so I noticed the last time that I was here that you had this piece of gold paper and I wasn't sure if it was the gold or the paper that you liked. So I brought both. He pulls out this length of gold ribbon and he gives it to her and he's like, you know, you can do whatever you want with it. He makes a joke about like tying it around the pig's tail in a bow and wouldn't that look silly? Like he's trying to make her laugh. And then he pulls out
a metric fuck ton of paper in England times.
Wallpaper or something, like it's all patterned. And he like shows her how to fold a fan with it. And she's like really, really enjoying it. And like she's really excited. And the mom comes out and what she sees.
Oh, her vantage point is the worst.
Not good. It's this older man and her simple, as she says, teenage daughter.
Yeah.
Bent over.
And they're both
looking
hunched
at
over
his lap.
And he's doing something with his hands on his lap.
Yes.
And so Mrs. Weaver understandably hits the fucking roof. She's like, Christine, get away from that man. Sir, get your fucking asshole out of here. Like, do not, like, basically don't come back. I don't want your meat.
Presents. We don't want the meat. Christine doesn't want any of your presents.
I want nothing from you.
We find out later that Mrs. Weaver is one of the maids. And Christine is the result of that.
Yeah.
And she went on to marry Mr. Weaver and live in this community, but she obviously
is not going to trust him.
No.
Abso-fucking-lutely not. Yeah, and we don't have that context yet, but even with just the context we have, like Mrs. Weaver was in the right.
Oh, absolutely.
And like that was a brave thing to do because they are hired laborers. They have their house only because her husband works as a hired laborer. So if he took offense to this and told them to kick rocks, they're fucked.
Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, he's just like, I can't believe things are going this bad on every fucking level. Nobody's ever thought I was a pedophile or whatever. Like this is, I hate it. And he's like, I guess I gotta go fuck that widow now. Like, God damn it.
So he shows up and y'all, she's in a sexy nightie.
Yeah.
She like has her
She's propped up on a chaise lounge.
She like was ready for him. She's like making an effort.
Yeah. And she's like, he told me not to try, but I feel like this could work. You know, this could not be super obvious. So she gets up and she just drops the nightie. He says it's the first time he's seen her completely naked, like not with one part of her like covered in bedclothes or whatever. And he sees this like fear in her eyes, but then she pushes it down and like walks very slowly over to him. And he promptly loses his mind.
So good. It's so good.
So
He's like, come on, you can do it. Be brave.
Yeah.
One more step. One more step.
One more step. He's like, I could make this easy for her, but I feel like this is something she's got to do.
Yeah.
So she comes all the way over and he just grabs her and just puts her on the ground
like,
right there on the carpet.
Bed. Are you okay with?
Yeah. And she's like, absolutely. But then she wraps her legs around him and like crosses her ankles and pulls him toward her. And he's like, oh my God. Oh my God. Then she grabs his shirt and like clutches onto his shirt. And he's like, oh my God, like she's touching me. It seems like she's into this. And he like, it's so cute.
It really is.
Like, oh, it's just so great. So afterward, though, you know, he's got that post-cum clarity.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, God, I was an animal just now. Like, I'm so sorry. And she's like, I actually, like, didn't mind it. And in her head, she's like, I'm going to touch myself to that later.
Absolutely, she is.
I'm going to make the guy that I conjure in my head who does not look like the curate at all.
Absolutely not.
couldn't possibly and will not look like him, but he's gonna, be a little animalistic with me. So then he
because
picks her
up to this point, everything that she's fantasized has been like very staid and very restrained and very proper. And she's like, maybe this time though, he might be a little so funny.
adventurous.
She's like, maybe my brain fantasies can like get a little spicy.
Yeah, yeah. So he picks her up and puts her on the bed, and she's like, I don't really know what to do. But he looks like when he walked in, he looked like there was something deeply wrong with him. And so she says, do you want to stay for a few minutes? It seems like you've had a bad day and like I wouldn't mind the company. And then her inner monologue cuts in and says that wasn't strictly true. Like she didn't need his company at all. But she says that the look on his face told her that it was the exact right thing to say.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another thing for her. She's such a social perfectionist that she's always worried about saying the right thing to people.
Homegirl needs to win at social interactions.
Yes.
Which, like, and she's the kind of person that, like, studies them to make sure she's doing them right.
Yes.
But, like, she's also real bad at them, which is kind of adorable.
Yeah. But he's such a happy puppy about
really
it.
Is.
And he, like, he gets into bed with her and he's like, I don't have to go into it, but like, I have to study this shit that I'm not interested in. And like, I don't want to do when I'm older. And like, it's just fucking bullshit. And she's like, she says, I don't know how to say this in a constructive way. And then she goes, I would be really stoked if I had like a land management tutor. Like you have this incredible opportunity.
Because, like, he has this tutor. Like, he has Granville. And she's like, do you realize how freaking lucky you are right now? And he's like, am I? And she's like, yes. So,
you have
this is an incredible resource. Sorry, right?
It's right after this, because she has a conversation with the curate in which he says, I find that people either raise or lower themselves to your expectations. And so like maybe cut him some slack and like, think the best of him and like, maybe it'll be better. He doesn't know about their relationship, but just like, on a human acquaintance level. And that's when he comes. It's so funny because he walks in with a bunch of books in his arms and he goes, stand and deliver, Mrs. Russell. I've had the devil's own erection for at least an hour. And she's like, what's going on with those books? And he's like, I said stand and deliver. Why aren't you naked? Oh, I thought that was going to be a thing. I'll talk to you about the books after.
So good.
So good. So then that's why she says, let's study together, because she's thinking he'll raise or lower himself to my expectations. Let's think better of him.
Right.
And he's immediately like, yeah, all right, cool.
And
I can do that.
It's really lovely because they like start going and visiting each other's tenants together. And they like, she goes along with him in Granville when they're looking at the enclosures, like the potential places to enclose. And she's so great because she's like, directing questions at Theo that she knows he knows the answer to because she wants to give him the opportunity to show Granville that she's studying, that he's studying. So she's like, so what's the pro for this? And he's like, oh, well, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, okay, well, what's the argument against? And he's like, oh, well, blah, blah, blah. And Granville's like, okay, yeah, make a note, right back to daddy. Like you're doing.
Yeah.
So, and like so much of the relationship takes place just like as they're walking like around, like they're just going on like these long walks all of the time, and it's like we basically for the next like third of the book they're either doing land management or having sexual encounters, and he's starting to get a little bit more, I don't know, bold, maybe not bold, but like he's starting to see that she is kind of into it and he wants to do as much as he can, especially one day when we know she finds out that Mr. James Russell, the predator, might come to the property in order to basically like watch and see if her pregnancy is legit. So she's worried about that because, she's obviously worried about her servants. Right.
And so the only thing he notices is that she's distracted or like she feels bad. And he's like, I'm going to distract her. That's my job today, is to like make her feel good and distract her. And so they get into this situation where she's at her table, her like vanity,
Mm-hmm.
and he's supposed to be getting her dressed again. But then he says, give me 10 minutes to just like kiss up on your spine, do a little nape of the neck kiss, and we'll see what's going on. She tries to haggle with him,
She's
and they
like, no,
adorably
5 minutes. And he goes, 7.
yeah.
And she goes, 6. And he goes, 7.5. And he goes, that's,
It's just like,
she's like, that's not how negotiating works. And he goes, 8, final
8.
offer.
It's so good. And so he starts doing this, and then he notices that she's not watching the clock at one point, and she's got her eyes closed and she looks drugged. And then he's like, oh no, I told her that I wasn't gonna get another erection and like I wouldn't bother her again. So I can't even last 8 minutes of doing this. I need to cut this off right now. So he goes into the other room and she's like, why did you stop? And he's like, I've got a situation over here.
And she's like,
And
okay,
as
well, like
she's
we can just read our book. And she goes to sit down next, and he's like, no, other side of the room, lady.
get over there, get away from me. And she's like, what is going on? And he says, okay, in our arrangement, is it okay if I like take care of things in other ways? And she's immediately like, I will not allow you to
No,
fuck other women.
all of that seed is mine.
I paid for that seed.
It's mine. I want all of it. And he's like,
I want all of it.
well, we have a problem.
Yeah, he's like, so I can't even give myself a hand job? Like, I can't even jerk it a little? And she's like, no, you may not, because I want seed. What if that is the sperm that was going to get me pregnant, and then I'm not pregnant anymore? He's like, I really don't think that's how it works, but, like, we're in a pickle then. Because, like, I'm very turned on, and I'm sorry about it. But he's like, you could help me get rid of it. And she's like, oh, Lord Jesus, like, okay. And she says, I will only agree to that if at the very end you put it in me and ejaculate inside me, because I don't have to get undressed for all of that. And he's like, oh, okay. Oh my God, these two. So he shows her how to move her hand over his cock or whatever, and she's like, and he has his hand over hers.
Yeah.
And she's scandalized by this. She's like, I guess it's okay because technically he's doing it. And then he lets go. And she's like, oh no, I'm doing it by myself now. Like, oh no.
Yeah.
And then he gets really close to coming and he's like, okay, get in position. I'm going to get inside you. And then he brings one of her hands back around him to his ball sack. And he's like, now, when I tell you, I need you to squeeze, not too hard, but like just squeeze a tiny bit. And she's like, she cannot believe that this is happening to her. She can't believe that he's even thought of this. Like she's just gobsmacked by it. So he's like, now. And she's like, okay, not too hard. And she squeezes and she's like this. And then he comes like he has never come before.
Yeah.
And the whole scene was hilarious.
It was very
so
funny.
good.
Also, I can't believe we didn't mention this at the beginning. She has feelings about male anatomy.
Yes.
That are
She's like, the male form makes no sense.
It makes no sense. Like, the female form is all like curves and logic, and the male form looks like somebody just like had extra bits of clay left over and just stuck them on wherever. Like, she does not find the male form attractive. She thinks it's ridiculous. Like, and so she's like working through all of this during this hand job. She's like, I don't know. Like, my hand's at this weird angle, and like, this isn't really what I signed up for. And
yeah,
so funny, y'all. It's so funny.
It's so good. And the way that he got her to do this was to be like, I am interested in going to talk to your steward. And also, I would love for you to visit my cottagers with me.
Yeah.
And so she's like, she's already decided that like she's going to send him back to London a better man.
Yeah. Because she's big on the improvement projects, y'all. And he's her newest improvement project.
Yeah. Oh my God. So they do that. And he like, because I think already, y'all, I don't know if this has happened quite yet, but he's decided that like he wants to turn the farm into a dairy.
That hasn't happened yet, but he is very like, we need to do something to make this place better. Like, we have to figure this out. I think
Yeah.
also he goes to see Mr. What's his face, the
Yeah,
bachelor,
Mr. Barrow.
Mr. Barrow. Um, uh, None of this is important that we get it like exactly the right order.
No.
So don't go read this book and then come back and be like Meredith and Melody. Like,
Yeah, my email is not open to
no.
that. Sorry, everyone.
But he goes to visit Mr. Barrow and he ends up there like at dinner time, and he feels really bad because like the rules of hospitality are like if you show up at somebody's house during dinner time, they like have to offer you their food. And like Mr.
And this man
Barrow,
is fucking poor.
he's poor. Like Theo doesn't want to take his food, and also his food kind of looks like shit, and he doesn't want to eat
It's
it.
terrible.
He like accepts some bread and cheese, and the cheese is terrible, y'all. It's
Mhm.
really sour and foul tasting and chalky. And Mr. Barrow's like, yeah,
Mhm.
it used to be a lot better. Like we used to make all this cheese. We used to do all this craft like in house. Like every cottager, every home had like all of these things,
Yeah.
and like that's all left
That's how I
because
grew up.
of industrialization, right? Like this is this like major time of social change in England where like all of
Mhm.
this thing is happening. And so Mr. Barrow is just like regaling him with stories of like how things used to be and how he grew up and all of this stuff.
Right. Right. And so it gets him noodling a little bit.
Right.
But she also she tries to ingratiate herself at the Weaver house. And like Mrs. Weaver is just exhausted and is not gonna, she just can't. She just can't at all with anything.
Martha takes the baby. She's like, "Oh, your
Yeah.
baby's beautiful. Can I hold him?" And Mrs. Weaver's like, "He is
That
not
baby's
beautiful."
colicky.
And like, I don't know why you'd want to, but like, I guess. And she's like, "Oh, like what a lovely baby." And like, "Can I take him outside for some fresh air?" And so they like go walk around, and like the pig is following them around like a faithful hound.
Oh.
And they go back inside to give the baby back, who is now sleeping. And they're like, "Where's your mom?" And they're like, "She's sleeping. She's having a nap in the bedroom. She's so tired." And they're like, "Well, shit, we can't just leave these kids alone." Like, I know
Yeah.
technically there's an adult here, but the adult is like dead to the world.
Absolutely.
What do we do?
And needs to be. Needs to be.
And so they're like, "Well, you,
I guess
like,
I'm going to clean up.
can you like show me where this is? And can you like where do we scrape the vegetables at? And
Yeah.
can you sweep this
So
floor?"
Mrs. Russell is doing all of that. And then he looks down at the table and he sees a partially folded fan. But the last fold
it's folded wrong.
is incorrect. And so Christine couldn't figure out how to keep going because she folded it in the same direction twice instead of doing either or.
And so he's like,
"Well, I guess I'm going to fix that."
He like very carefully, like without looking at Christine, without making a big deal out of it, but very like his hands are very visible. Like he's not, trying to do it like all. He's like very obviously like unfolds it the wrong way, folds it the right way, finishes folding it, and then he realizes that like all around this cottage, every single scrap of paper Christine could get her hands on, she started folding and then folded wrong and got stuck.
Yeah. And so he's like, "Well, I guess this is my job." Like he may as well be narrating out loud what he's doing. He's trying to make it so obvious. So he goes and gets all of them from all around the cottage and he starts fixing all of them. And then Mrs. Russell sits down and she starts doing it too without even asking.
She's just like, "Cool, like this is important. This is what we're doing now."
Yeah.
And then Mrs. Weaver comes out and Mrs. Russell goes, "Would it be okay if I sent some like scraps of wallpaper and stuff? Because that way Christine won't be folding up all of your household accounts and bills." Because she like once again is so good at like figuring out like the right way to persuade people. And so Mrs. Weaver's like, "I mean, I guess like, yeah, that would make my life easier. I wouldn't have to like look for the electric bill because it like got folded up into a square or something." They don't have an electric bill. Don't come at me for that.
We knew that. Yeah, we knew that. And so she leaves like a book of dresses.
Oh, that's right. She has like
or whatever.
It's
a fashion plate.
Yeah, she like packed this basket to go visit the tenants, and she like took books with her and like highbrow cake, and then realizes that like, oh, like actually these people like what they really need is like meat and like flour. But she has this book of fashion plates with her. And so she's like, "I don't actually need this. The papers are really pretty. Can I leave this with you?" And then That way you don't have to like have your bills,
Yeah.
you doing okay?
She goes to visit the Weavers a couple of different times, and there's another time when she says, "Oh, Theo, Mr. whatever Merkel is not with me, and I told him that the right thing to do was to like come and bring gifts, but if he hasn't done that yet, it's probably just because he's so busy." And Mrs. Weaver goes, "Wait a second, you told him to come and bring gifts?" She's like, "Yeah, absolutely. I told him like how to be a good landlord or whatever." And Mrs. Weaver just like harumphs and like starts thinking about things, obviously, like keeps doing laundry. So things are changing a little bit on that end.
Oh, and also she like gets Mrs. Weaver, because like Mrs. Weaver is like that very poor, very proud, like we don't accept no charity, even though they desperately need it sort of person.
Yeah.
And so Mrs. Russell is just like, "Oh, I'm gonna leave this with you. We've left one with everybody else. Like this is just like very matter of fact. Like this is nothing special about you. We're just like
this is normal stuff.
Normal stuff. We've dropped one off at everybody else's. Here's yours." And so she like gets her to accept like whatever was in the basket at that point in time. Theo decides he's going to replace the Weaver's roof. He's going to replace the whole thing.
She has a competence boner because he not only decided this on his own, but he decided to also throw a picnic for everyone, knowing that they all had to be out of their houses while they
and like
did
wouldn't
this.
be able to cook and like all of these things. So he like made all of those arrangements by himself, and she's just like, "Sir."
She's gobsmacked, and she's like, "You've never been hotter." And at one point, like he gets her Christian name while they're in bed, and like tells her his and all that kind of stuff. But he uses it when they're in private. She still calls him Mr. Murdoch or whatever his name is.
Mirkwood, I think.
Mirkwood, sure.
Forest and Lord of the Rings. I don't know. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So they like throw this picnic, and like it's really lovely. And like he is up on the roof. He's like folding the like pins that hold the thatch in place, and like scampering up and down the rafters like he's been doing it all of his life. And she and Mr. Grantville both like around this time are getting this understanding that like Theo is a hands-on person. Like if you try and make him read a book, it's not going to happen, but like give him a problem to get his hands into, and he's on board. Mr. Granville takes him, he makes him go threshing for 2 days and then takes him to the mill, and like Theo is now super invested in that process because like he's been there, he hands-on, he did the thing, all this stuff.
Well, and he's like, humans should not be doing this, especially 86-year-old Mr. Barrow.
Right.
Like this is hard work that humans should not do.
And like, yes, they
should be doing this a better
around
way.
Their like mouths and noses, but like it's not good for their lungs. We need like a machine should be doing this, and like, yeah, but like people need the work. And he's like, yes, but not this work.
Right. And like they can still like oversee or whatever. But that's the other thing that I love about this section, because she and the land agent, Mr. Grantville or whoever, they've also come to the realization that like lectures about duty will not do anything. Like if it's theoretical, he's not going to glom onto it. But if you take him and show him that a problem impacts a human,
he's all
then
over.
He's like, oh, we have to fix it immediately. How do we do that? Like, let's get started.
Right. So while they're at the mill, they drop off the wheat, and then they have to wait for it to be milled. So it's like in the town, and so he like goes and wanders around the town. There's like a market going on or whatever. And what is he trying to buy that he meets the lettuce? He's like looking at this lettuce.
And like he's not trying to buy it, but he's like, I'm gonna make a friend.
Right.
I'm gonna figure this out.
So there's this like woman in half mourning, which means lavender. She's wearing lavender, and she's like this older, like portly widow, and like the way she's acting, he's like, she'd be real good friends with my Mrs. Russell. Like they're the same human. And he's like looking at this lettuce, and she goes, "You better not pay more than 2 pence for that." And he's like, "Oh," and she's like, "No."
He's gonna try to take you for a ride.
And then the shopkeeper comes over. He's like, "Oh yeah, that lettuce is 5 pence." And he's like, "Oh, okay." And he gives him 5 pence. And she's like, her name's like Mrs. Coleman or something. I don't remember. And Mrs. Coleman's like,
badly done.
He could smell you had extra money. He got 3 extra pence off of you. And Theo's like, yeah, but like he needed it and I don't. So like I'm kind of okay with that. Also, would you help me like shop? Like I could use your help. You seem like a very knowledgeable person, blah, blah, blah.
And like, he wants to get gifts for everyone, and he wants to bring Mr. Barrow cheese.
Like better cheese. And so they go to this place, but Mrs. Coleman's like, this cheese it's not good. Like, they do not have good cheese here. And he's like,
and there's only one dairy in the whole region.
And so she goes in and she's asking, like, well, how much is this cheese and how much is that butter? And he's like outside with his notebook, like writing everything down. She's like being real loud on purpose. Because she's like, yeah, like the cheese here is like chalky and it's not good and it's too expensive and blah, blah, blah. And so he
starts noodling.
Right. He's getting an idea. And he also gets another idea that like Mrs. Coleman should probably call on Mrs. Russell. So he just says some casual
dropping
thing.
hints.
Right. She's like, oh, do you know Mrs. Russell? And she's like, oh, no, we don't. Like, Mrs. Coleman's not the snobby one. She's like, I would not presume to like. And he's like, oh, well, like, she's this widow. Like, she's really this like fine, upstanding person. Like, just like.
He says, but she was married so little time that like she didn't really get a chance to make a lot of acquaintances, and it's not really proper for me to visit her. But she has no other callers. Yeah.
And so
isn't that awful?
Terrible. And then he convinces her to like take the lettuce for her pig if she's not going to eat it or whatever. And so a couple days later, Martha gets callers. Mrs. Coleman and Mrs. somebody else and Miss a third person show up. Yeah, and introduce themselves and say, hi, we're your neighbors.
And she's like, I don't know what precipitated this. Oh, my God. But then they ask about her soldier brother. And she goes, there is only one human on the planet who knows about my soldier brother and is not part of my family. And it's Theo.
And I thought she was going to be furious, but y'all, she's beaming. She made
She can't wait.
Theo.
She can't wait to tell him about the call.
She's so excited.
Oh,
and
my God.
Like continues this through the rest of the book, like trying to like get people to call on her, and you know, like, and it's just she like is becoming.
He's just widening her circle.
Oh, it's so good.
Oh, okay. So the other thing that's happening at this time is like. There's a few things happening at once.
Yeah.
One, he's decided that he wants to change the farm into a dairy because they can give a better product. And like, he asks her about it and he keeps on getting her advice and her opinions about it. And she's like, I will help you. I'll help you research. We can talk to my steward. We can do all the things. And then he's at one point in the book, he's like, do I have a meeting with my laborers, or do I talk to the land agent guy, or like, how do I do this in the right order?
Right.
And she's like, he's never been sexier. And also like, you'll come to the right conclusion. I'm certain of it. And he watches her she watches him just like preen under her praise. Yeah. And she realizes that like, this is the first time in his life that anybody's taken him seriously. And it's so cute. And then also she finds out that Mrs. Weaver is pregnant for a ninth time, I think. And she just had this other baby. And so she's like, oh my God, this would be the perfect timing if I need a boy. And Mrs. Weaver has a boy. And like, okay. Also at the picnic, she found out that Mrs. Weaver was the ruined maid. So that has happened. And
about this time, they find out that Mr. James Russell is in fact coming to visit.
Yes.
And so she has this amazing meeting with her maids. And she's like, cool, here's what we're going to do. If you don't have an inside lock on your door, not just like the doorknob one, like a slidey bolt lock, please raise your hand. Okay, we're going to get them installed. You all have permission to yell. And Sheridan's like, can we hit him? And she's like, yes, go for it. Like, you have permission
whatever's
to do
going to make you the
you need
safest.
to do to keep yourself safe. Like we're going to get the footmen involved. Like everybody's going to be on high alert. Like you will be as safe as I can possibly make you. And I loved it so much.
Yeah. Couple of things happened before that that's just a little important to set up that whole thing. No worries. So one of them is that he also wants the kids on his land to go to school. And so she's really liking that. And then when he keeps on asking for her advice, I just have to say this quote. She goes, serious, conscientious, and seeking her opinion. He could have had anything he wanted of her in that moment. And then she kisses his forehead. Yeah. And like, I don't know, he tries to get her to talk dirty one night, and so instead she like plays with his nipples, and then he's like, "Oh my god, would you maybe use your mouth though?" And she's like, "Sure, man, as long as I don't have to talk dirty." Licks his nipples, and then he's like, "You're a witch, you're a sorceress," like all these
Yeah,
things.
it's so good.
Yeah, and then Mr. Barrow gets sick.
Right. So Mr. Barrow is like the one that knows about the dairy. So they're going to go talk to him to try and figure out this whole like, how do we actually do this? Who do we talk to? Whatever. And they show up
Mm-hmm.
and they immediately know something's wrong. The animals are all squawky and,
Yeah,
he opens the
and then
door and there's just this stench. And he's like, Martha, you may not come inside. And
right.
he thinks that Mr. Barrow has died, which thankfully he has not. He was just very, very sick.
Thank goodness.
He's
I
like,
was
I know,
crying.
I was really upset. I was like, this old man better be fine, which he is.
Like, I'm so glad it wasn't Chekhov's bachelor grandpa,
Right.
you know?
So
Like,
he doesn't let Martha, and Mrs. Weaver shows up. Martha like
yeah.
runs off to like send a boy to go get the doctor, and Mrs. Weaver comes, and he like won't let them in the house because of their like ladylike sensibilities or whatever. And Martha and
Well,
Mrs.
I don't,
Weaver,
but also because of Mr. Barrow.
well, yes,
He's like, Mr. Barrow wouldn't want anybody to see him like this. And like he won't let them get a cart. He's like, I will carry him
yeah.
with my
So
hands.
he like Mr. Barrow has had like some type of stomach situation. So like the bed's real gross, y'all.
Yeah.
So he like cleans him
And so
up
he's like, burn it.
and like puts him
Burn
in a new
everything.
nightshirt, and then he's like, please burn everything. And Mrs. Weaver's like, he doesn't have more sheets. Like, can't we just wash them? And Theo's like, no, burn it. I will give him sheets off of my own bed. He will not
I will give him a mattress.
burn
Burn the
everything.
mattress too.
And so Mrs. Weaver and Martha just like stay there and feed the animals and like light all of his bedding on fire and like
Oh my
have
God.
a really lovely like chat.
They do because and he realizes like when she sees Mr. Barrow, she starts thinking about her father and when her father died
Mhm.
and how frail he looked. And so she starts getting really emotional. And so he looks at her and he says, Martha. And then both of them freeze because he did this in front of Mrs. Weaver. And it's pretty obvious now that they're boning to Mrs. Weaver and like, oh boy.
Right.
And then when he's gone, she tells Mrs. Weaver, you don't need to say anything about this, but I know what happened to you and I'm going to make it right in some way.
And Mrs. Weaver's like, that was a long time ago. I don't really know how you think you're going to make it right, but like, cool, let's not talk about this anymore.
Right, exactly.
Which, fair.
So, okay. Then they have the meeting with his workers about the dairy.
Yes.
And she's like, I would have told him to like be austere and removed and authoritative, to have this meeting. But he just sits at the table with them, elbows on the table, and he's like, I want to do a dairy and I want you to throw, deference or whatever away. Tell me if you think it's a stupid idea and like, let's work together if we can.
Also,
And
I don't remember when this happens, but he tells Granville what he wants to do. He's like, okay, I figured this out. Here's my business plan. I'm going to get investors, blah, 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 blah. And Granville's like, actually, your dad kind of thought you might come up with an idea like this. So like, I have this pile of cash that I wasn't supposed to tell you about until you came to me with a business plan, but like, you don't need investors. But actually, they come up with this scheme to like get the townspeople to invest. They're basically making a dairy co-op, right? So like everybody around gets a little bit of a share and everybody gets some ownership. And because they want the tenants to be able to invest. And so they want
the tenants to be able to afford their higher quality product.
Right. So they're like coming up with all these like, well, we can go sell fresh milk and cheese to all the rich people who go to Brighton. So that way we can keep our prices low here. And like, we're going to like have investors, but they're not going to be like rich people from the city. They're going to be like the people here. So like the Weavers can have a share if they want to. And Mrs. Coleman
and
can
that
have
way
10
everybody's
shares and,
Right. Yeah. And everybody's invested in the success of this
and so
dairy.
Mr. Granville's like, you don't need the investors, but I think the investors are a really good idea. And Theo goes, cool, I'll come up with some other way to spend that pile of money. Maybe on the school or something. It's great.
Yeah, it is. And then we find out he does. He gives the curate a stipend in addition to his other stipends and stuff. And like, because at one point she confides in him all the lying that she's done. and everything she hasn't been able to tell Mr. Atkins, even though they are very close. Like, you know, she tricked her husband into doing all these improvements when he was Hammertown. And like, he told him that she was going to write to James Russell to be like, you like school too? Question mark. And like, she never did that because she's just trying to desperately get pregnant instead. Right. And he says that he likes her better for it. And because he loves that she puts herself on the line for other people. Yeah. So they have this amazing meeting and she's blown away, and like everybody has a good idea, and you know, everybody has a task when they leave. Mrs. Weaver comes over and she can't hear what she says, but Mrs. Weaver sticks out her hand, shakes his hand, and then he goes from like very grave looking to like a small smile and like talking to her because their misunderstanding has been cleared up.
No.
Oh my God. And like on the way home, because he's like, I'll walk you home. On the way home, he's like, why are you looking at me like I'm suddenly a Hydra? And she goes, you're a leader of men. I never thought it was possible, but like, you're a leader of men.
And he's like,
no, I'm not. He keeps on saying,
shut up.
I know. And he keeps on saying like no woman's praise will ever like rise to how this feels. And then he tries to like pull her into an embrace when they're in the woods. And she's like, no, not where people can see. He's like, but I mean, can we though? Like, I don't think I can wait until tonight. And then they do some frisky stuff.
They do. My word.
My goodness.
It's on TM, which is a weird thing to say after they've been having sex for 3 weeks at this point.
Oh, yeah. She thinks she might already be pregnant.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, it's been a minute, but like, they're finally like feeling each other, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. And so he's like, I want to try something. Will you? And she's like, yes. And he goes, I think you should probably like tell me some parameters of what you don't want to do, or like ask me what I have in mind.
She's like, nah, man.
And she says, no, I trust you. And he like dies a little. Yeah. He's so excited.
And I also died a little, I need to say.
Same.
It was real good.
Same. And like that. This is the brilliance of this book, because I spent the first third fucking pissed off, but by this point, I am so hooked on these two, and I'm so invested in them getting together and understanding each other that like it hit so much harder than I think it would have otherwise.
Because this is the point in the book where you start realizing how incredibly good they are for each other. Because she desperately wants somebody to appreciate her for her mind. And he is doing that. And he is asking her questions and like taking her seriously. And like, she'll be like, here is this cause. And he'll be like, cool, let's do it. And he like desperately wants somebody to take him seriously, even though he didn't realize that. And she like is taking him seriously and like holding him to a higher standard. And like, he gets her to loosen up a little bit. And like, there's a scene that we didn't talk about. They're like talking to this shepherdess, and the shepherdess is reading a novel, and Martha's just like really stilted, trying to be like, oh, well, like, I mean, novels are fun, but like, have you read anything more edifying? And like, he's like, this isn't how you get through to this girl. And he just like starts chatting with her and coaxing a smile out and, you know, talking about, and Martha's realizing that like, he has this thing that she doesn't. Like, he can talk to people. He can figure out like how to make people feel comfortable. And so like they just are meshing so well, and it's so lovely. And I loved it. It was just, so good. And also, this is the point where I'm like, how do we possibly like make this happen? Because
how do we do it and also protect all the people and like do all the things?
Like, I don't love that like she's trying to lie, and I'll be really upset if this book ends with like her keeping this estate through deceit. Like that, I'm not gonna like that. So like, okay, that can't happen. And like, but he has his own land, and like, but we need to protect all these people. You know, I'm like, how is this gonna happen?
Yeah, absolutely. But at this point, he's like, okay, then take off your stockings, and then you're going to tie me up with them, and then you're going to have your way with me.
Well, he doesn't say that to her. He like leads her through it. And so she's like taking off her stockings, and then he's like, toss them on the bed. And she's like, what? And he's like, no, just do it. It's okay. And then he's like, okay, I'm going to show you how to tie this knot. And she's like, whoa. And he's like, no, you're going to do it. Come on, be stern.
It's for me, not you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's so good.
And he's like, you're thinking about it. You know, you want to be in control. And then once he's tied up, he starts being like a very bad boy. And he's like, fuck me. Let me be your whore. And she realizes that like all this time, he's like asking permission still. It sounds like a command, but it's not because she's in complete control. She can do whatever she wants. And then he's like, touch yourself and torture me by not letting me touch you and all the business.
He also tells her before they start, he's like, I'm going to tell you to like untie me. Like, please don't. Like, don't do that. And then he's like, come on, let me touch you. Let me touch you. Let me touch you. And she's like, nah.
Mm-mm.
So good.
And she kisses him on the mouth for the first time. He realizes that it's for his pleasure. Then she mounts him and then gets very insecure because how do you do it at this angle? Yes. This angle is different and weird. Oh no.
Yeah, she like
I'm gonna look like an ungainly.
She starts to have a panic and he's like, no, you're okay. Like, let me show you, like lean forward just a little bit. Okay, there you go. Like now
and I'll close my eyes.
Oh yeah, because she's like, I'm gonna look weird and awkward. And he's like, you're not, but I won't look if that makes you feel better while you figure it out. And then she's like, okay, you can open your eyes now.
Yeah, and one of the reasons she does that is because she knows he takes so much pleasure in the visual stuff. And so she's like, even if I look weird, he should have his eyes open, you know? And then he's like, touch your nipples, whatever. And then she thinks to herself, what is the point of having a man in your bed if he's not going to do shit like that for you? So she leans down and picks up his head and he like groans into like, her nipple.
No, use your mouth instead. And he's like,
oh
please,
my God,
baby Jesus, put that in my mouth.
He's like, never has anything been better. And then he's like, okay, now you have to untie me because it's about to be go time and you need to be on your back for me to deposit this seed into you. And oh my God, it's so cute. And then as that happens, he reaches down and touches her clit and he's like making eye contact with her to make sure she's okay with it. And she throws her head back and says yes. And then they come together and it's like the best. He flops on the side of her and he's like, it was that easy. All I had to do is let you tie me up. And she's like, nah, I had to know you. Like I had to know that you're a good person. Okay, so then he's simping hard for her now. He's planning their life together. They're going to get married. He's like in it to win it, but he's not telling her that. And then like she decides to blow him for the first time. That's a whole thing. And then he props her up in a chair.
Oh.
And he does this
I'm sorry. I have to.
Yeah.
When she is going to blow him, he's like, I really desperately want this, but I don't want you to do it if you find it unpleasant. So if you're not enjoying yourself, I need you to promise me that you will stop, even if I'm begging you not to. Like, I need you to promise me that you're not going to do this if you're not having a good time. And I just loved that so much. And she's like, yeah, I promise. And then did not stop. And it was great.
It was so good. But then he goes down on her for the first time.
She's never
in her life
that before. And he's like,
yeah. Oh my God. And then he takes her and like he does this whole like queen and stable boy fantasy. And then he takes her over and like
he like sits her in a chair with her like leg on either arm and like is like telling her that like she's this queen and like he, you know, blah blah blah. And it's just
it's really so good.
It's real good.
Oh, and then when he comes inside her, he is fully daydreaming about all of the children they'll have together in the future, like what they'll look like. All of this is happening.
When he says that he loves her? Yeah, at the end.
Yeah, afterward,
Martha,
he's so overcome.
I love you.
And she says, I have something I have to tell you. And his inner monologue is, what's the chance that like that will precede I love you too? Like, it's not great, but here she goes. And she's like, I think I'm pregnant. Like, I think basically we're sort of done here. And he's like, but we don't have to be done. We can have the baby together and like we can get married at some point and like we can do all of those things. And she finally tells him about the predatory nature of the guy who's meant to inherit. And he's like, I knew it was something more than just her wanting to stay on the property. And then he goes, are you telling me that you won't even have me if it's a girl? Because if it's a girl, she's free and clear. She's still, and she says, if it's a girl, I'll get a baby boy another way. And he's like, holy fuck balls. I did not know it was like that. And she says, I will do anything to protect these people and to make sure I do good by them. And then he says, but it like devolves from
Yeah.
there. And by the end of it, he says, well, I guess the only thing I can do is wish you happy. And he puts on his pants and he's like, and also the curate. I guess I'm going to wish the curate happy. And she's like, what are you saying, sir? And he's like, I don't know. I know what's going to happen. 3 years down the line, you're both going to be crushing on each other for the whole time. And then one of you is going to finally give in. And then like, you're going to be married forever after that.
They like sort of
and
have a fight and like he fucks off and they're both mad at each other, which I love.
She says, I am never going to be home to you. Like you cannot call anymore.
It's so good.
And then he wipes her taste off his
And
mouth
drops the
and walks
handkerchief.
away.
Leaves the handkerchief and leaves. And I'm just gobbling it up like potato chips at this point. I'm here
crying.
for it.
Oh my God. I'm like, how is this book not over? How is this a romance?
So,
but then this is when they find out James Russell gets there,
well, he's coming. So they're like, she asked him, so like they're trying to help the maids like protect themselves. And Sheridan's like, gee, if only we knew somebody who was good at boxing who could show us a thing or two. Like she keeps like dropping all these hints out like, hey, you need to get Theo back here. Like,
let's reach out to him.
Stupid. Like,
and she's like, well, we're not in that situation. And so we'll just have to make do with that.
And so Mr. James Russell shows up with his wife and his
wait. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, everybody. Wait.
What did I miss?
I'm so sorry. So then he finds out that James Russell is coming. And so he calls on her to be like, I'm not here to rekindle anything. I just want to help.
And she's like, cool, teach my maids how to protect themselves.
So then they collaborate and they spend a whole day together, like figuring out how the class is going to go and strategizing about how to convince the maids to like get serious about it. Then they have this whole self-defense class and he's like, she is just like a general and she's so hot right now. And like, I'm so deeply heartbroken and I'm never going to have her again and all these things. During the self-defense class, they have like a moment and he says, you're a leader of women. And I always knew that. And then he walks away and then James Russell arrives. I'm so sorry.
That's fine. That was important.
To say that out loud.
That was very, very important. Yes. James Russell arrives with a wife and 2 sons.
Holy shit, he has sons.
She starts feeling real bad because she realizes that by carrying out her plan, she is depriving these 2 boys of their inheritance.
Innocent children.
Right. And Mrs. Russell is like this woman who like eats a lot and doesn't talk a lot and is clearly miserable and like barely has opinions.
She's just been browbeaten for years.
And like, justice for Mrs. Russell.
Oh, for sure.
And so Martha starts feeling real bad. Like this is, I think, the first time that she is feeling like maybe what she's doing isn't okay.
Is deeply wrong. Yeah.
Which made me happy because like that was making me real uncomfy this whole book.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and but again, there is that she was so smart to put that wrinkle in there about him knowing how bad his brother was. Because like there's a moment at his grave where she's like, it might not have your blood and it might not have my blood, but it will be raised a Russell. And like we will protect these people together. And she's trying to make it work in her head. And then when he comes, she's done everything to like protect the maids.
Right.
But he comes to her door and he unlocks it and he's like, hey, I'm just going to sit by this door because I knew that you would protect everyone else, but not actually protect yourself, ma'am.
And she's like, oh, well, maybe you should sit at the foot of the stairs instead. And he's like, nah, the footmen are all over it. And she's like, oh, well, thanks for asking them. And he's like, I didn't ask them. They just did it. Like the whole
my God. And she's like, there's a community here.
Is, like, coming together.
And then that gets her thinking because she has not had community here, but
Right.
obviously there is one. And so she then is like, you know what? You can't do anything if somebody shines a light on it. So she starts writing to all of her people. And she's like, I need you to know that this
And
terrible
they
thing
have a
happened forever
meeting.
ago.
She gets Mrs.
Everybody shows up.
Pullman and Mrs. somebody and Miss
All of the
somebody
rest of them.
else.
Yeah.
Everybody shows up. All of the friends. And they call Mr. James Russell in. And he's like, hump, 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 what is this? And they basically are just like, you will never be welcome here. We know what you did. You're a terrible person. You will never, ever be able to live here comfortably. It's not
No.
going to happen. And we find out, I think we
So
found out
good.
before this, he wanted to bring his mistress and like set up a new home here and basically leave his wife and kids like up in wherever he lived previously. And so they basically run him off, which is awesome. But then it gets better.
Okay, so then that night, he's gonna spend the last night at her door because they know James Russell is. Oh, I'm so sorry. At that meeting, Mrs. Weaver and Mr. Weaver get their say too, and it is delicious.
Yes.
Oh, it's delicious.
Mr. Weaver's
Mrs. Weaver
like,
is there, and she's just like, oh.
Mr. Weaver. Yeah, because Mr. Weaver's like, if I ever see your face again, I will punch it. And Mrs. Weaver goes, if I ever see your face again, I will stab you. I will cut your throat. I will go to jail and I won't even feel bad about it. And I was just like, I would die for this woman.
Fucking chef's kiss. Oh, it was so good. So the final night, he's going to stand by her door. She says, will you just come to bed with me? Like, I need this. I think you need this. And so they have this very, very sweet sex. And it's basically like goodbye sex for him.
Well, it's like goodbye sex for both of them. Like, they both know it's the last time. He keeps telling her not to cry, and she doesn't realize that she's crying until he says that. And, like,
yeah,
it's real sad.
It's a whole thing. So in the morning, he goes, because this whole time he's been by her door, he's been telling her, stay the course.
Right.
You know, like, I know you feel bad for those kids, but like, stay the course. You're in it now.
And she's like, but I have an idea. So that morning, before Mr. Russell leaves, she goes to him and she's like, look, here's the deal. You are never going to be able to live here. I know you wanted to live here with your mistress. Here's the deal. I will go away. This baby that I have will disappear. You'll never hear from us again.
Mm-hmm.
You move your wife and sons down here. Let them live here. Do not bother them. You go fuck off with your mistress in your hometown. Your boys can still inherit. Your wife gets a break. You do not ever come back here. And he's like, deal.
So she tells everybody she had a miscarriage. And right after that meeting, she goes marching down to his house because she's like, oh, I'm going to get me a husband.
It out.
Ooh,
and she gets there and he's left for London. And she goes, what does she say? She's like, I should have checked with the husband before I assumed.
Yeah.
Like,
she said, my whole plan hinged on having a husband on the sidelines, and now I don't has one. And like, oh, fuck. Yeah. So he's in London, but like, he's not happy. He doesn't feel fulfilled anymore. And he's like, I'm just going to go back to that dairy. I'm going to turn it into a dairy. Like, I got to finish it. I think I've got to do it. Yeah,
he's like feeling real bad. He's like, I came up with this idea and then just left. Like, I should be there to see it through. Like, it's going to be real bad being so close to her. But like, I feel this commitment and this responsibility, blah, blah, blah. So he goes home to his parents' house and he marches in and he goes, Father, I'm moving back to Sussex. And his dad's like,
and his father is so proud.
Yeah, I had a feeling. And he's like, great. And I'm making a dairy. And the dad's like, uh-huh. And he goes, and I'm getting married. And the dad's like, record scratch, what?
Uh-huh. And he says, I did seduce
a widow?
A lady. I got her in big bad trouble. And
the dad's like, and you will never be welcome in any home in London again. And his sister's like, my home. He'll be welcome in my home. And also the rest of his,
all of our homes.
The rest of the family, like, we'll make it work. He's happy. We're thrilled about it. So the dad's real grumpy, and the mom and the sister are both like, hell yeah. And he goes back to Sussex to figure it out.
Yeah. And so she's there with with two of her siblings because she's had to go to plan B and be like, I guess I am moving in with my siblings now. Fuck. And he gets there and Granville tells him about the sad, sad news of that lost baby. And
He
so he
rushes
immediately
over there, bursts into the parlor, falls to his knees in front of her,
embraces her.
I'm so, so sorry. The brother and sister are like, who is this clown? What is happening? She's like, what are you so sorry about? He's like, the and she's like, no, that was, it's fine. Everything's still there. They're like trying to have this conversation real quiet.
And he's like doing a big confused while he's also incredibly elated that their baby is still alive.
And meanwhile, the brother is like, who are you? Do I need to shoot you? I'm going to shoot you. And the sister,
are we dueling?
The sister's like, calm down. This isn't like, I want to know what happens. She fully has opened a bag of popcorn. She's here for it.
Oh yes. And then Martha looks over at him and she says, stop making him think this family is crazy right when I'm about to ask him to join it. And then he looks at her and he's like, is that a proposal? And she's like, it is a proposal. And both of them are like, society will never be okay with it. And she's like, don't worry, everybody. My reputation is so good that they won't think anything happened before. They'll think he's trying to save me from being dependent upon my siblings. Yeah. It's the fucking best.
It's so good. And then the novel ends, which I loved.
Goodbye.
There's no epilogue. We don't find out if the baby's a boy or a girl. Nothing. It just ends. And I was like, yes.
Yes.
It's so good.
It's so fucking good. Yeah, this book. Wow, I had such mixed... Oh, because we didn't tell them about the actual somnophilia that we were weird about. There is a time when he starts sleeping over at her house when he does wake her up with penetration. And she's like, what's going on here? And he's like, I mean, do you really want me to stop, though? And she's like, I guess not. And so, yeah, there's like many times where I was like, I should be fundamentally not okay with this. And yet I am.
There was explicit consent throughout the whole book, but it took very long throughout the book for it to become enthusiastic. And like that made me feel really weird. And like the whole like premise of like lying, like I'm going to get what I want. Like that made me feel really weird and like, okay, this can't be how it ends. But then like she has reasons, capital R reasons for doing this.
Yes.
And like, I support those reasons, but like, how is this going to work itself out? And like, it did, everything worked out super well.
Oh,
but yeah, it was a journey reading this book.
It was.
But whoever 5-star recommended it, Patricia, I think.
Yeah, Patricia.
Excellent. I've already bought the next book in the series.
It's so good. Oh my God. Yeah. Who's the next book about? Do we know them?
Will. It's one of her brothers.
Cool.
It's about all of her family. It's like the Blackshear family. So
nice.
I think Will is the soldier brother.
Maybe. Yeah. Wow. This book was so good. Do you have a lady love?
I do have a lady love, which is my cold brew maker.
Ooh.
Y'all, I drink a lot of iced coffee in the summer because A, iced coffee is delicious, and B, I am very queer, and that is the beverage of the queers. Liz knows what I'm talking about. Liz asked if nobody else will appreciate that. And I don't know if y'all know this, but an iced coffee at Starbucks these days is like $6.
Yeah. And it's not very good.
And it's not very good. But I bought a cold brew maker, which is just a pitcher with a filter inside of it.
Yeah.
And vanilla syrup. And y'all, it's amazing.
Oh my God.
It's so good. And I just fill up the filter and put the water in it and leave it for a day and then have cold brew for like a week.
Hell yeah.
It's my favorite.
Hell yeah. Ooh, I love that. That's great. Oh my gosh. What is my lady love? You know what? My lady love is
stealing plants.
Do a crime for plants.
Do a plant crime, y'all.
Yeah.
Heaving Bosoms, where we recommend and endorse plant crime.
That's right. Plant criminals is what we are. Yeah, no, do a crime for plants. Like it's fine.
Other plant crimes could be spreading wildflowers seeds around. That's an excellent plants crime. Potentially introducing native plants back into an area where they haven't been existing. That's a good plants crime.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, I'm just so pleased with myself, honestly. It's kind of a mess. I'm like just so pleased with myself. I was telling my poor father-in-law about it, and he was just so mystified by my whole deal. It was so funny. Okay. Meredith, where can they find you? And also, can they hire you?
They can hire me. They can hire me for all of the things. They can hire you, listener. Now is an excellent time to commission any holiday gifts that you might like to commission, scarves or hats or sweaters or anything else. You can find me on the internet at m.haynes on Instagram. You can find me in the cult. I do hang out in the cult.
And you got an Etsy shop?
I do have an Etsy shop. We are currently doing a little bit of a relaunch, rebranding situation. Myself and a couple of other artisan friends are doing a collab shop. So you'll be able to find all sorts of things there, not just me. So you can follow that at Fog and Honey on Instagram. Yeah.
But you do other stuff. Don't you do long distance meal planning and stuff?
I do long distance meal planning and grocery shopping, grocery lists and stuff. I do many different types of virtual, making your life better stuff. Yeah.
All right.
You can hire me for pretty much anything you want. I'm available.
I will put that in the show notes too, because I'm certain you can make somebody's life easier and better.
Yes, easier and better, y'all. That's what I'm here for.
Yeah. All right. You can find Heaving Bosoms all the places. Instagram's probably my most active at Heaving Bosoms. However, listener, go follow us on TikTok because I'm on TikTok now and I'm doing the thing. I'm doing it. That's at Heaving_Bosoms. And I want you to follow me there, please. And thank you. And yeah, if you want to rate and review the podcast, if you give us 5 stars, you can recommend a book that we will definitely absolutely do. And we don't have a choice about it, which is very exciting. It might take us
4 years, but we will do it.
That's the one. Yes.
We do not promise speed on that one.
No. Again, this was a 2019 recommendation, but it is coming true.
You can also email us all your thoughts about justice for that pig that the Weavers have.
Yes. The amount of times where he was trying to block that pig from getting in a door.
Just wanted to go inside.
I had sensory memories, so vividly, of pigs just trying to burst through things at me. Oh, it was so fun. Justice for that pig. I love the pig.
But they can email us at heavingbosoms
podcast at
gmail.com. Yep.
Yeah. All right. So keep being a badass.
Love yourself as much as Theo loved being tied up in the gold.
Oh, goodness. Yeah. That was wowza.
Yeah.
So good.